The trail was one Maya had done before. That was the part she kept returning to later, not when she was still in the forest, but after, sitting in her car in the parking lot with the engine running and the heat on, and her hands not quite steady on the wheel. She'd done this trail before, twice in the last year alone. She knew the fork at mile 3, knew the exposed ridge section where the wind picked up regardless of the weather elsewhere, knew the particular mud situation near the creek crossing that had ruined a pair of boots she'd liked. She knew the trail, which meant the trail had changed, or something about her relationship to it had changed, or the trail had always had this in it, waiting, and she simply hadn't found the right conditions before. She didn't know which of those was true. She still didn't, sitting in the parking lot. She put the car in drive and went home. It started small, the way these things apparently do. She'd taken the fork at mile 3 the way she always did, left branch toward the ridge, and walked for what felt like the right amount of time without hitting the exposed section. She checked her watch. She'd been walking 40 minutes from the fork. The ridge should have appeared 20 minutes ago. She stopped. The forest around her was dense and ordinary, afternoon light filtering through in the way it did in late September, that particular gold that made everything look slightly more significant than it was. Nothing was wrong with the forest. The forest was doing exactly what forest does. It was simply not the forest she expected to be in. She backtracked to the fork and tried again. Left branch, 40 minutes. No ridge. She stood still and did what her hiking course had taught her, confirmed her last known point, checked her compass, checked her map, checked the app on her phone which showed her as a blue dot sitting precisely on the trail she thought she was on. The GPS said she was correct. The GPS said the ridge should be visible. She looked up from her phone at the trees, and the trees did not contain a ridge. She tried the right branch. Then she tried backtracking further and taking the left branch again. Then she sat on a rock and ate her remaining trail mix and drank most of her water and accepted, with the methodical calm of someone who has read extensively about not panicking, that she was lost in a forest she had been in before, on a trail her phone believed she was still on, in the middle of an afternoon that was becoming an evening. She picked a direction and walked. The clearing appeared without warning, the way clearings do. One moment trees, then open sky. It was large, larger than clearings usually were in this part of the forest, which ran dense and didn't give much up. The grass was the pale gold of late season, knee-high in the center, trampled in a rough circle near the far edge where the campsite was. She saw it immediately. A tent, orange, well-made, a brand she recognized. A fire ring with a grate over it, coals dead but the ash recent. A clothesline strung between two stakes with a blue bandana hanging dry and still. She called out. The clearing absorbed her voice without returning it. She crossed the grass slowly, the way you approach something you're not sure about. The campsite was arranged with care, bear hang done correctly, cookware clean and covered, a folding chair angled toward where the fire would have been. Someone had been here recently and had not been careless. She checked the perimeter of the clearing. No trail led out from it that she could find. No obvious path in. She didn't understand how a campsite this established existed here without an access trail. She called out again. Then she stood for 10 minutes and listened to nothing. The tent zipper was closed. She waited. If someone was hurt inside, or had left ID she could use to find an emergency contact, she needed to check. She crouched, unzipped the fly, looked in. Sleeping bag, neatly rolled. Foam pad. A stuff sack with what felt like clothes inside. A headlamp hanging from the peak loop. And beside the sleeping bag, on the floor of the tent, a journal. Spiral bound. Waterproof cover, green. The kind you bought at camping supply stores. She picked it up. This belongs to Lucy Harper. If found, please leave in place. She opened it. She found herself on the last written page. Not metaphorically. Not in the way people mean when they say they see themselves in something. She found herself. A description. In handwriting she didn't know. Precise and without embellishment. Woman. Solo. Blue rain jacket, broken zipper pull on the left pocket. The pull itself missing, just the metal loop remaining. Dark braid, mid-back. Entered the clearing from the northeast, through the dense section near the two leaning birches. Arrived approximately 5:40 p.m. Stopped at the perimeter for a moment before crossing. Called out twice. She looked at her watch. 5:43 p.m. She looked at the date at the top of the entry. She read it twice to make sure she was reading it correctly. She was. The date was 3 weeks ago. Her hands had gone strange, not shaking, just not quite hers in the way hands sometimes stopped feeling like yours. She sat down in the grass next to the tent and kept reading. She's carrying a 38-liter pack, dark green, older model. One trekking pole, right hand only. She ate at the rock near the fork, trail mix from a yellow bag. She's been drinking from the reservoir, but she's lower than she should be. The bag had been yellow. She hadn't thought about the color of the bag. She would not have described it as yellow, she would have said orange, but looking at it now on the ground next to her, she understood that yellow was more accurate. She turned back pages and kept reading. The journal described her whole day. The drive to the trailhead, her parking spot. She was in space 4. The journal said space 4. The song she'd had stuck in her head on the approach, something she'd heard on the radio that morning and couldn't name, just the chorus looping. The journal described it as a song she can't name, just the chorus. The decision at the fork, the 40 minutes of walking, the second attempt. The rock where she'd sat and eaten. Each entry was time-stamped, each one correct, each one written 3 weeks before she arrived. She turned pages with increasing slowness, not because she wanted to stop reading, but because she understood, with a certainty she couldn't justify, that she was approaching something she wouldn't be able to unknow. The handwriting never changed. Lucy Harper, whoever that was, had consistent, neutral penmanship, neither cramped nor loose, the kind of handwriting that communicated nothing about its owner. The entries were observational, not interpretive. No commentary on what any of it meant, just data. Just her. She reached a section of torn pages, clean tears, not ripped in a hurry but removed with care, maybe a ruler held against the spine. 12 pages, she estimated, running her thumb over the stubs. Whatever had been there was gone. Whatever Lucy Harper had written after recording her day and before describing her arrival, that was gone. The removal felt deliberate. The removal felt like a message of its own, though she couldn't have said what the message was. After the torn section, the entry about her. The blue jacket, the braid, the 5:40 p.m. arrival. She read it again. Then she read the last line of the entry, which she had somehow missed the first time through, tucked at the bottom of the page in the same neutral hand. Did you read far enough? She put the journal back in the tent. She didn't let herself think about why she put it back instead of taking it. She told herself it was because the note said to leave it in place. She was aware that was not the real reason. She found the trail out on her first try. It was exactly where it should have been, the northeast edge of the clearing, through the dense section, obvious, marked, not hidden at all. She didn't understand how she'd missed it. She walked fast without running, which she was proud of later, and hit the main trail inside of 20 minutes and reached the trailhead as the last light was going. She sat in her car for a while with the heat on. Then she drove home. She showered for a long time. There was something she was trying to wash off that wasn't mud, but the hot water helped anyway. She stood in her kitchen afterward in clean clothes and made pasta because it was the most normal thing she could think of to make, and she ate it standing at the counter, and she felt almost all right. Then she opened her laptop. She told herself she was just going to look, just to see if there was anything, any record, any report, any explanation that would let her file this under a category she already had. She typed variations of the same search for an hour. Unexplained clearing in forest journal. Hiker found campsite, no owner. Trail disorientation, same forest, different path. She found a Reddit thread from 4 years ago. A hiker in Oregon describing a clearing she'd stumbled into off-trail. No journal in this version, just an empty campsite, a fire ring with warm coals, a tent unoccupied. She'd waited an hour, No one came. She'd hiked out and reported it to the ranger station, and they'd found nothing when they went to look. The thread had 11 comments, most of them suggesting she'd misread her map. One comment, with no upvotes, said only, "Don't go back." She closed the laptop. She got her journal from the shelf, physical, cloth-covered, the one she'd kept for 3 years. She brought it to the table and wrote for a while. The act of writing it in her own hand helped. She described the fork, the disorientation, the clearing, the campsite, the journal. She wrote the date at the top of the page and recorded what had happened, the way you recorded things you needed to get out of your body and onto paper. She wrote until her hand ached. Then she closed it and went to bed and eventually slept. She woke up wrong. Not all at once. The wrongness arrived in pieces. The surface beneath her was not her mattress. The smell was cold air and pine and the particular damp of forest ground. The light was not coming through her curtains from the street. She opened her eyes. Nylon, orange, 6 inches from her face. The peak loop above her with a headlamp hanging from it. The sleeping bag she'd seen the night before rolled neatly at her feet. The stuff sack. The foam pad beneath her. She was in the tent. She lay still for a moment in the way you stayed still when you were not sure what was happening, and stillness seemed like the safest response. Then she sat up and unzipped the fly and stepped out into the clearing. Morning. Low light, dew on the grass, the sky gray-white through the tree line, the fire ring, the clothesline with the blue bandana, the folding chair, the campsite, arranged with care, exactly as it had been. She stood in the clearing and understood several things at once: that she had been here before, that she was here again, and that there was no framework she owned that could account for either of those facts being simultaneously true. She found the journal in the tent where she'd left it, or where she'd found it. The distinction had stopped being meaningful. She opened it to the last written page. The entry about her was still there. The blue jacket, the braid, the arrival time. Did you read far enough? Below it, in the same handwriting, a new entry, dated this morning. You made it home. That's real. You were there. It happened. The shower, the pasta, the laptop, the thread about Oregon. You wrote in your journal before you slept, and that helped. We know it did. The third time is always the hardest. You'll want to check if your entry is still there. It is. So is the one before it, and the one before that. You've been here before, though you won't remember. You never do, coming back. You wrote in your journal last night, the one at home. Check the last page. That one's ours now, too.